Hi, it's so wonderful to see faces sitting in this space. Welcome to Southeastern's 57th annual meeting. My name is Gina Trask, and I am Southeastern's board president, and I am delighted to welcome you to my home institution, Mount St. Mary College. This college is situated in the city of Newburgh, which in a moment you'll understand why it is important that we acknowledge the place that we're situated in. This institution, Mount St. Mary College, was founded in 1959 by the Sisters of St. Dominic. Our motto is, "Be the spark." Be the spark. It's inspired by a quote from St. Catherine of Siena. "Be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire." Amount Education aims to inspire students to spark change in their communities and make a difference in the world. And when I was reflecting on this, I thought it real fitting that today's annual meeting is a gathering of librarians, archivists, and information professionals in the Hudson Valley who are change agents in your communities, and that we're in the second illuminated municipality in New York. So on March 31st of 1884, electric lights appeared for the first time in Newburgh storefronts, signaling the arrival of innovation. As librarians and archivists and professionals, you spark change in your communities through your innovative work. You illuminate collections, you shine a light on resources to fill patron needs, and you brighten people's opportunities through programming and access to technologies. So thank you for sparking change and making a difference in your communities. Moving on to today's event, it contains two parts, as you can see on the agenda on the screen. First is a business meeting, followed by a panel discussion. We're going to be learning about urban renewal in Newburgh and in Beacon. During part one of the business meeting, we will do business tasks. So we will approve minutes from last year, announce new trustees and officers, and we will hear from Executive Director Tessa Killian. On your table, or when you came in today, you had a copy of the agenda, and on the agenda is a QR code. So that QR code is going to take you to all of the documents for today's meeting rather than print them out. And I want to ask you to take a moment now to navigate to those documents so we can look at them together. I invite you to look at the documents, specifically the agenda from last year's annual meeting. So we will now approve the minutes from the June 2nd, 2023 annual meeting held last year at the Henry A. Wallace Center at the FDR Presidential Library and Home in Hyde Park, New York. Please take a moment to review the minutes that are posted on the webpage. Are there any comments or revisions to the minutes? Hearing none, they're approved. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Executive Director of Southeastern up to the podium, Tessa Killian.
Thank you, Gina, for that beautiful welcome. All right, so good morning, everyone. Hi. It's lovely to see everyone here today. It's both my pleasure and my privilege to give this report on behalf of the council. So a couple of people asked me this morning, I know Southeastern had their annual meeting at Mount St. Mary. When was that? And it was in 2015. We were here. We were over at the new Kaplan Family Library, and we had our annual meeting in 2015. So it was a number of years ago, and I know some of you were there. I was there. That was my first meeting as executive director. So today I plan to use my time to update you on some services and discuss some new initiatives that we've been working on. Before I do that, I want to recognize some special guests that we have here today. They're representatives of our elected officials. So we have Megan Hurlbert, who's the Chief of Staff for Brian Mayer. Thank you, Megan. Brian is the mayor, is the assembly member for the 101st Assembly District. We also have Lanky Gans. Hi, Lanky. Lanky is the Constituent Relations Coordinator for Rob Rollison, Senator for the 39th Senate District. And do we have someone here from Jonathan Jacobson's office? We were hoping someone would come from Jacobs because this is his district. Okay. So thank you both for being library supporters. So before I give the updates, I want to acknowledge many people who support this great organization. So I want to thank everyone in the room, all of you for being here today, and all of the people who are attending via our live stream. We have a live YouTube stream today, so there's a number of trustees and members who are joining us remotely. So Southeastern has grown. We have 110 members, which is really wonderful. And the newest members include the Beacon Historical Society, the Columbia County Historical Society, the Germantown History Department, the Town of Pelham, the Western Sullivan Public Library, the Westchester County Historical Society, and the Rhinebeck Historical Society. So I'm glad to see growth in those areas. How does that look? Looks pretty good. Okay, so I wanted to share this donut chart with you. And this chart represents a breakdown of our members by library type. So one of the things that I just love about Southeastern and our multi-type system, and what I think makes what we do so amazing, is bringing together different types of libraries and organizations to collaborate on projects, to learn together, and to share. So you represent many different sectors in the community and in the business world and the nonprofit world, but what you all have in common is serving your community's information needs. So looking at the chart, the most significant growth area in membership are with the public libraries and the cultural heritage organizations who join to use our digitization services. You have a lot of experience. You know that, right? We know this because in our annual survey, we ask questions to get to know our community and the demographic of our regional workforce. One of the things that we ask is, how long have you worked in libraries? How long have you worked in cultural heritage institutions? How long have you been involved in this profession? So at least among the people who completed the survey, because that's the representation we have, we learned that 73% have worked in libraries for over 10 years. And 20% of us, that includes me, over 30 years. So the staff keeps coming back to this information and this question. What do we do with this data? What do we do with this information? What does this mean for the future of our profession? I don't have the answers. I'm just asking the questions right now. So we're going to do another survey, and we hope to learn more, about you. And I mean, there could be, I'm not going to answer the question. I'm going to keep going. So this graphic demonstrates the groups that work together to govern, advise, and manage our programs and services to make Southeastern's network operate smoothly. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the people represented here and their work supporting Southeastern, starting with trustees. They volunteer their time and serve 5-year terms to help govern the council. We currently have 13 trustees. Also in the room, I know who you are several people who have previously served as trustees and some newly nominated trustees. So I want to thank you for your leadership, your knowledge, and your guidance. And I'd like all trustees, both current, past, and nominated, to stand. So thank you for giving them a round of applause, and thank you, everyone. All right, committee members. are dedicated volunteers who work with the staff and trustees to inform our services in 5 key service areas: continuing education, equity, diversity, and inclusion, digitization, hospital library services, and resource sharing. So could everyone who is either a chair, and a member of an advisory committee please stand and be recognized? Thank you all. We have 8 fantastic staff members: Jen, Zach, Carolyn, Moshe, Liz, Kelsey, and Sarah. We have a combined 103 years of service to Southeastern. We're not that old either. Okay, well, maybe we are, I don't know. All right, could all the staff stand so we can recognize your dedication to Southeastern and our members? I encourage you to take a look at the 2023 year in review document. It's on our website and linked in today's program agenda. Now you have that webpage up, you can take a look at it there. This document provides a comprehensive overview of our services, including our list of our members and our audited financial statements. It is also an excellent resource to share with new staff who want to know more about what we offer, and a great place to see the names of all the people involved in Southeastern. As we begin to think about our services, I want to focus on the ones listed on this slide. So I know this is a very busy slide, but I have a lot to say about it. So this slide highlights the forward-facing services and websites we administer. So for each service listed here, Southeastern supports the service and the infrastructure, but the content that populates those services is from you. So the Ask the Lawyer service, the first one on the left, that's your questions. Your questions populate Ask the Lawyer. The Digital Navigators of the Hudson Valley is you and other library workers who are doing that job. Empire ADC is full of all of your finding aids from your institutions. The HRVH Historical Newspapers is your papers from your communities, your historic papers. The HRVH virtual exhibits are highlighting your collections at your libraries and showing them in a really cool way for people to read through and look at. New York Heritage is the collections from all of our members who put them online to share with the world. And SEAL is a resource for you to borrow and lend from each other, our regional system. So those are all the services that we have that are the forward-facing ones. And as you can see, the green and the blue parts of the columns represent your likelihood of promoting them to your colleagues or patrons and demonstrate their value to you and your community. So we want to gather more information like this in our current survey, which is open till June 14th, so a pitch for our survey. So please take a look at that and fill it out. We'd love to hear from all of you. So that was kind of a broad view of, walkthrough of some of our forward-facing services and their value. Now I'd like to focus on how we work together to connect, preserve, and expand them. So looking at our professional development, based on your feedback that we received, we've adopted a hybrid approach to programming, offering both online and in-person events and hosting the content in a way that makes the most sense for you. So last April, we held CineCon as a hybrid event, and we had a room full of people in our building in Highland, as you can see in the picture, and then more online. It was a really wonderful day. All the sessions were from regional libraries, including some folks here from Marist, Newburgh Free Library, and SUNY New Paltz. Carolyn, Zach, and the SEAT Committee do an excellent job organizing this event. Additionally, Carolyn archives all of both the presentations and the videos of all of our events on our website, so we have a great archive of all the things that we've had. So if you've missed a program, you can still go back and get that content. Upcoming events include a program on research data management for our academic libraries, several special interest group meetings, and in October, Fall into Books, the annual Children and Teen Literature Conference that we put on with the public library systems and the school library systems. And then in the fall, we're going to have another poster session event. So one of the services that we've been offering for 57 years, this is how we got started, is connecting patrons to resources from different libraries. We've gone through various iterations of the Union catalog through the years, including changes to the most current Southeastern Access to Libraries, which is both a front-end Union catalog and back-end ILL system for staff to borrow and lend materials from their patrons from 180 libraries in the Hudson Valley. So last October, in response to a SEAL survey, we made significant system updates and designed a new front-end and website. Notably, Kelsey and Zach added delivery recommendations for transporting books, ways for libraries to place multiple requests for the same item, like you would want to do for a book club or a group that's reading the same book. And what was the third thing? There's a third one. Oh yeah, they added some really nice quick links to frequently used information, which is what people wanted. As part of our resource sharing programs, Kelsey, Sarah, and Moshe support requests for medical and consumer health information, and the program pays for these articles if there's a fee. So last year we supported 470 requests from hospital, public, and academic libraries. Okay, preservation. A major part of our work involves digitization services. 78 members use at least one, and our knowledgeable staff, Jen, Zach, and Kelsey, manage all of these services. So pictured here is a map of pins where there are collections. Their public usage is excellent, and we're really proud to report that we've had over 1.4 million page views of our collections in New York Heritage in 1 year. I think that's pretty impressive. So as mentioned, new members joined to use these services and have added many new collections in the past year. So a few that I want to highlight are, the image here is from the Beekeeper's Journal, which I think is really, really cool. It's an agricultural magazine from the mid-1800s, and it was digitized from the Putnam Historian's Office. And we have an early 1800s manumission record from Columbia County, which was digitized by the Hudson Area Library. And communities in Olive, Pelham, Millbrook, and Rhinebeck have added over 140,000 pages of newspapers. This presentation took a long time to prepare because I was reading the Beekeeper's Journal. It was featured in our newsletter this month, so if you have a chance to take a look at it, it's fascinating. I want to mention one of our projects that's been in development for a while. So Jen and Zach have developed and managed the Digital Dark Archive, an online digital preservation system currently used by 10 member organizations and several organizations from other regions of New York. So I want to say that this slide makes it look simple. We put it on the slide to just kind of give you a visual of what this project is, but it's not a simple project. It's a complicated project. It took years of development to create this robust preservation system using national standards to get the job done for a fraction of the cost of systems designed by larger consortia. Preserving the digital files you create is an essential piece of a digitization workflow, and we support your preservation efforts in this way. So we're in this for the long haul, helping preserve this content for the future or for disaster recovery. When you're ready to do this work, we have the system for you, and the best people to talk to are Jen and Zach about that if you're curious to learn more. So I want to give one shout out to one of our member projects this morning. The New Paltz Historic Documents Project is funded by an NEH project and led by Historic Huguenot Street. I want to showcase this project for two reasons. One, it's a cooperative model among the organizations in one town. I think it's really cool that they did this. Historic Huguenot Street is the lead organization managing this project and partners with the public library, the church, and the town of New Paltz. All of these organizations have content, and this project connects them through this digitization work. Secondly, they use all of our services, so I think that's pretty awesome too. By storing the collections in New York Heritage, hosting the project front end and website on Omeka, which is the virtual exhibit software we use, and preserving their files in the Digital Dark Archive. And by doing so, they have the added benefit of a lot of Jennifer's expertise. So Historic Huguenot Street was recently awarded a second NEH grant, so they can continue this work, which is really great, because I don't think they were done. They had 3 years, and now they have 3 more years. So congratulations to Historic Huguenot Street. Okay, digital navigators. Since 2022, our digital navigator service has supported digital inclusion by helping clients with broadband access, affordable devices, and digital literacy. This service thrives thanks to Mid-Hudson Library System, Ramapo-Catskill Library System, Westchester Library System, the Digital Navigators, and Carolyn's leadership. This truly is a partnership among all of us. Currently, 62 people from 49 libraries and community organizations serve their communities as digital navigators. The participating organizations are paid an incentive amount for the digital navigators' participation in the service. To be a digital navigator, they must attend training and group meetings and perform other activities like promoting the service. Their main function is to meet with clients to assist them with affordable broadband, appropriate devices, and basic technology needs. So the pins on the map show the communities with active digital navigators. We are fortunate to have financial support from the regional library systems and several elected official grants, allowing us to continue this work into the next fiscal year, 24-25. If you're interested in being a digital navigator, we are currently recruiting for a summer cohort. So the goal of this service and all digital inclusion projects is digital equity, which will exist when everyone has the technology and internet access needed for civic and cultural participation, employment, lifelong learning, access to essential services, including health services. Not everyone has these, and a digital divide exists between those that have them and those that do not. So we will continue supporting this work to close that gap. So we're working closely on closing the digital divide locally with the Digital Navigator program, but we're also involved in a statewide initiative. Last year, we collaborated with Mid-Hudson and RCLS to gather data on digital equity needs in the Mid-Hudson region, contributing to New York State's Digital Equity Plan. The goal for the plan and the Connect All office, the administrator of this initiative, is to build New York State's digital infrastructure, connect all New Yorkers to internet service, and ensure that everyone can benefit from the opportunities of being online. So what did we learn about the Mid-Hudson region? I'm going to tell you a few things that we did learn. We learned through surveys and focus groups that we have a larger share of rural residents than other regions. We learned that residents need more reliable, affordable internet service options. We learned that 59% of us care about digital safety, particularly about stolen data and scams. We need digital literacy training to access health information and online banking, how to apply for jobs, and using online government services. So I spent a lot of time reviewing this plan, and I want to tell you that throughout the plan, it's 360 pages long, just to give you an idea of how this plan. It's online. It's on the Connect All website. It's a pretty weighty plan. But what I want to share with you is throughout this plan, libraries are mentioned as community anchor institutions and serve as centers for accessing digital devices, digital literacy programming, and internet access. Now, you all know that, right? Because we do it. We do it all the time. This is what you do. But what is important to know is that it's in this plan, that libraries are recognized throughout this plan as being these anchor institutions. The plan lists many implementation strategies that outline the needs, objectives, and activities in several areas that I have listed on the slide. The plan also looks closely at exploring the current assets, such as anchor institutions like libraries, and investing in them to build on the work we are already doing. Additionally, it encourages organizations to work together and to strengthen existing networks. The program funding this plan is the Digital Equity Act. It's a federal initiative established as part of the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that provides $2.75 billion to develop grant projects and to promote digital literacy nationwide. So at the federal level, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration will administer the programs to states. The Digital Equity Plan is essential to securing New York State's share of this federal funding, which will sponsor 5 years of projects promoting digital equity and inclusion. So at Southeastern and with the systems, we're paying very close attention to the deployment of this plan. I think this is one of the most important initiatives of our time where we can have an impact. And any grants available through this plan will be an opportunity to serve the covered populations in the Mid-Hudson region. As this plan gets implemented, we will share relevant information with the broader library community. And I think they made a big announcement yesterday. So there's some grants that are opening right now. In the executive statement in this plan, it says, achieving digital equity in New York will require long-term investments across sectors to make progress impactful and sustainable. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to talk with you about anything related to digital equity. Yep, one more. Okay, we're almost ready, Becky. So today we looked at how we are all connected, how we preserve our history, how we engage with the community, and we are so honored to work with you on these projects, and I really look forward to the year ahead. So I'd love to talk with you if I'm here all day, and just stop me and let's have a chat. So thank you very much for your time. Okay, now I'm going to introduce Becky Albitz. Becky is the chair of the board's trustee and officer nominating committee, and she's going to give that committee's report. I'm going to take the clicker with me. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. So, thank you to the governing members who participated in the online election. On behalf of the Trustee and Officer Nominating Committee, I'm pleased to report that 4 people have been elected to Southeastern's Board of Trustees. The newly elected trustees are me, Becky Albitz, Director, James A. Canavino Library, Marist College, for a second 5-year term representing academic libraries beginning July 2024. Josephine Bloodgood. Josephine, are you here? Oh, she couldn't make it. Okay. Director of Curatorial and Preservation Affairs, Historic Huguenot Street. She's busy doing things. For a 5-year term representing the cultural heritage community beginning in July 2024. Kimberly Hooper. Yay, Kimberly. School Library System Coordinator, Rockland Bosse's School Library System, representing school libraries beginning July 2024. And finally, Andy Ashton, Director of the Libraries at Vassar College, representing large academic libraries beginning in July 2024. So congratulations to all newly elected trustees starting your term July 1. Please. Now, I would like to announce the slate of officers for the 2024-2025 Board of Trustees. President, me, Becky. I'm busy too. Becky Albitz. Grace Riario, Vice President. Beth Zambito, Secretary. Ellen Rubin, Treasurer. And Floyd Latin, Assistant Secretary Treasurer. So please thank your colleagues who have volunteered their time and expertise to serve as officers.
Thank you for presenting that, Becky, and thank you truly to those members who are serving Southeastern as trustees. I hope that you see from what Tessa presented that our work makes a difference. So now we want to spend some time acknowledging outgoing trustees, and I'm going to invite Tessa up to do those acknowledgements.
Laura Streett, where are you? There you are. So we have one trustee leaving the board this year. It's Laura Streett. So we can come up and join us, Laura. I'm going to put you right here. Thank you. So Laura served 2 terms on the board, which is 10 years. Yes. So I want to extend our sincere gratitude for your time volunteering at Southeastern. It's hard to sum up your contributions in a few words because that's 10 years of work, right? But I'm going to try. So Laura served for 5 years as secretary and many, many more years as the chair of the bylaws committee. She was on the committee that helped us create the hospital service for the Vital Librarian program that we currently have. And Laura helped us get Empire ADC off the ground. So thank you, Laura, so much for supporting Southeastern in this way. We are really going to miss you. As a little parting gift, we have a certificate of appreciation for you. And we also have a specially designed read picture featuring Laura. We didn't put it up on the screen. So, thank you. And
Thank you so much, Tessa, and all of the folks that work at Southeastern. So wonderful, and I hope to work with you again soon. This was I've been involved with Southeastern since I started at Vassar. Actually, I was involved in the digital archives committee, and then on the board, and it's been wonderful. This is the best organization I have ever worked with. Even I was terrified when I started, when I heard Robert's Rules of Order. First of all, they work. It's really great. But everyone who I've worked with on the board has been lovely, committed, just a wonderful group of people. And I've so much enjoyed getting to meet people outside of the academic library system and learn more about what you do, the wonderful things that you do. Thank you so much.
all right, well, I still have the microphone. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge Gina Trask's service. So thank you, Gina, for serving the board president as 2 years. We appreciate your time and dedication to Southeastern in this leadership role. You brought great skill, efficiency, thoughtfulness, and caring. It's a lot to this position. You really did. And it was a pleasure working with you. Gina's still on the board. She is still on the board for a few more years, but I wanted to just take this moment to thank her for serving as president.
Thank you. Appreciation is appreciated. So, right, doesn't that feel good? So thank you so much. This has been a rewarding experience to be a part of the board and then have people trust me to lead them for the last 2 years, and I know that the work I'm doing is highlighting amazing things that are happening in your community, and that's why it's rewarding. Yeah. So we want to take time now to really acknowledge a particular person that's doing something amazing in their community. So I'm going to invite Grace Riario up here to present the Twila Snead Award.
Hello, everybody. It is my pleasure to present the Twila Snead Commitment to Excellency Award. The award is named in memory of Twila Snead, who served as the medical library manager at St. Lucas Cornell Hospital right here in Newark for 20 years. Twila demonstrated professional commitment, hard work, and dedication to continuous improvement, establishing the framework that inspires the award for excellency librarianship. The annual award now is in its 10th year. So that means for 10 years, we have honored people that are just amazing. Honoring outstanding, excellent individuals and organizations or programs. This year, the award selection committee unanimous agree about this person. Leadership in creating new and enhanced service models that other libraries or cultures organizations can emulate. Improvement in the physical facilities resulting in a better service of the community. Those are the two criteria in the award, and this person meets them 110%. So I am most happy and proud and honored to announce that Ginny Neidermier, the library director of Josephine-Louise Public Library, is today the awarder. Ginny? Yay! So, 12 years ago, I had the privilege to get the job as the outreach coordinator at the Ramapo Catskill Library System. What I didn't know at the time is that I will also have to be the advocacy for libraries. I will have to be the assistant director. I will have to be the outreach coordinator and pretty much the cheerleader for libraries. In a world where it is all about politics, right? Politics are very difficult, very hard. I admire the elected officials that work in that field because it's very difficult. And any public library director will tell you, ooh, the amount of things MLS degree does not teach you. Wow. That's one of them. It does not teach you how to advocate in politics, does not teach you how to speak to a senator or an assemblyman in a way that they will understand our language, right? Because we librarians have that whole different language of speaking. So when I got this job, I had no idea what I was doing. But I was lucky enough to see this young lady and doing her thing. So she does not advocate just for the Josephine-Louise Library in Walden. She advocates for 17 libraries in Orange County in front of all the legislators in Orange County. The first year, she got $140,000 for all those libraries. The year after, she fought, and she got $150,000. And then when, the pandemic happened, and they thought, oh, she's not going to show up. Oh, no. They don't know her. She showed up, and they gave $106,000 to the libraries. And she's been doing this for all the years that she's been the director of Josephine-Louise. So she's the inspiration to me to advocate for libraries. Because if she can do it, I hell should do a better job, don't you think? And I have to say, this woman also inspires the way she treats the community. There's no one in Walden, New York that doesn't know Ginny. And one of the things you need to know is, as being a public library of a municipal library, the hardest thing people will say to you is, as a director, maintaining, collaborating with the municipality is very difficult. Why? Because every 2 years, you may get a new supervisor, right? She has maintained that relationship for 18 years. And that's one of the hardest things you have to do. And she has maintained it. She has grown it. She has collaborated with them. They have done so many things together. And I can tell you that the staff is here, right? And they're all here, not because she doesn't treat them well, not because she doesn't enhance their library. It's because we all know how much hard she works, the hard work she does every day, the impact she does in the community, the impact she did to me in my life 12 years ago, and the impact she continues to do to every single library director in Orange County, in Rockland County, in Sullivan County, and Ulster County, because this young lady also serves in every community you can imagine. We have committees, and she puts her word in there, and she puts her hard work in there, and she has always done everything for everybody. So today, we're going to embarrass the hell out of her so she understands how much we love her, how much we admire her, and how inspirational this is that she's being recognized today. So, Ginny?
Thank you, Grace. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my gosh. So, thank you, Grace. Oh, my gosh. So I'm as red as that shirt. Thank you. Okay. So I wasn't nervous until a few minutes ago, and then I got nervous. There were a few things I was going to say. Well, first of all, just to be mentioned in the same breath as Twila Snead, I did not know her, but we all knew of her. We knew her work. We knew what she meant to Southeastern. So just to be a part of her legacy, I think is a great achievement. It's almost like the Academy Awards, I think. And I couldn't do this with every award, but I couldn't do this without a great Board of Trustee president and leadership who lets me do what I want, and my staff for following me on this parade of doing what I want. And then I work with the great municipal village manager who also lets me kind of do what I want. So I just want to thank everybody for showing up. Thank you to my staff, Mel, John Ravella, who's not here. And I can't do anything without RCLS. So I just want to acknowledge everybody at RCLS because they allow us to, just elevate our own platform. I think that was all I needed to say. But thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Go sit down now.
Ginny, you can sit down. We got some people that want to say hi to you. Come on. So we have Megan Horberg, who is the Chief of Staff for Brian Meyer, Assembly Member for the 101 Assembly District. She has something for you. The party doesn't end.
Oh, from Brian. Oh.
He's away on military leave, so I had to
No,
fill
he
in.
is. I knew that. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
He sends his love.
From Brian and his office.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you.
And of course, Senator Robert Rolson, he sent also a nice little award thing for her in the mail to the library. So it's not here, but we do have a representative here making sure that Ginny gets the love from that senator. And we also wanted to acknowledge if Jonathan Jacobson, he's here. Okay, but he also sent something to the office, to the library to congratulate Ginny. So as you can see, what I said before, she does an amazing job. So
Thank you. Thank you, Grace. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
thank you.
Okay. Now it's.
Excellent. This is the feel-good moment of the annual meeting where we get to honor one of our colleagues. So congratulations. This wraps up the first part of today's event. We're going to take a 15-minute meeting and reconvene here at 10:30 or okay, well, we are going to take the full half an hour, so we have time to set up the panel. You can use that opportunity to network, to have a break. We have some refreshments in the hallway. The bathroom in the building is straight down the hallway past the food. There's also restrooms downstairs if you take the stairs or the elevator down that way. So I look forward to seeing you when you come back and we can hear from our engaging panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. We know that one of the reasons we have this program and what people say is they want time to network. So I hope you had that opportunity. So now it's time for the second part of today's program, the panel discussion. So I hope that you had a few minutes to review the materials from the Beacon Historical Society in the back of the room and enjoy some more coffee and some more networking and some yogurt and fruit. Okay, so now it's my pleasure to introduce Carolyn Bennett Glauda, Southeastern's Program and Outreach Manager. Carolyn will introduce and moderate today's panel on urban renewal in the Hudson Valley. So welcome, Carolyn. Ready?
All right. Cool. Thank you, Tessa. Since we're starting just like a few seconds early and we honored Laura today, I just want to say, I want to give her one other shout out because about 12 years ago at this time, I was starting library school at Albany and I had a friend who worked at Vassar and I said, I don't know, are there any jobs in the Hudson Valley? And he said, you should talk to Laura Streett. And so I met with Laura And she wrote on a Post-it note, I don't know if there's any jobs, but you should meet the people at SENYLRC and Tessa. And I said, that is just the weirdest acronym I've ever heard of. And I reached out to Tessa and she said, I don't know if there's any jobs except for at our place. And I said, okay, that works. And I've been here ever since. So thank you, Laura, for making the connection. Okay, with that, I'm going to kick off today's panel. Welcome to our discussion on urban renewal. It's my honor to introduce you to our distinguished speakers and to give some context to our discussion. Our guests today include Dr. Dave Hochfelder from SUNY Albany, who has spent years studying and writing about urban renewal in New York. He's also been a partner to ESLN and our members. He's helped curate and present exhibits over the years. We've got Mary McTamaney, who is the historian of the city of Newburgh, and in that role, she's uncovered troves of documents about the city's rich history. We have Wilbur Higgins, who has resided in the city of Newburgh before, during, and after urban renewal, and who was the recreation director there, in addition to serving on the boards of community organizations such as the Greater Newburgh's Park Conservancy, the Newburgh Armory Center, and Meals on Wheels. We've got Diane Lapis. She is the former president of the Beacon Historical Society, a former teacher and author of a book about postcards and cocktail culture. And she is the curator of the Urban Renewal exhibit that she'll tell us more about today. And finally, we have Tony Lassiter, who is a lifelong Beacon resident who served in the U.S. Army and worked at IBM. His life of service includes being on Beacon's planning board, the Housing Authority, the Lions Club, as well as coaching Little League and basketball. So before we hear from them, I do want to say a few words about this land that we're on. Way back when I was getting my library degree and also a history degree, my persistent challenge was pinpointing when something could be considered history. Isolating events from their inciting incidents was always a challenge. Kind of like unraveling a knit sweater, every pull on a thread of history can take you forward to the present or infinitely backward in time. There's always more to learn about the preceding incident, the historical framework, the political context, ancient history, and so on all the way to the beginning of civilization. If you make a hard enough pull on that thread, it leaves you knocking at the door of the astrophysics department with a tangle of yarn in your hand asking about the Big Bang. So with the interest of not unraveling the thread too far, today's discussion will be firmly rooted in what happened here 50 to 60 years ago. I bring up the thread of history because these urban renewal projects were not the first time our government displaced people from their homes. Today's discussion focuses on the relentless drive to improve infrastructure in the name of modernizing cities like Newburgh, like Beacon, Poughkeepsie, Kingston, Albany, and many others. We know what happened because it was documented, and some of that documentation was salvaged, and some of the witnesses to these events are still here with us. The people doing this preservation work are in this room right now. Documentation of the indigenous people who lived here is much more fragmented, and we hope to undo some of that erasure with a land acknowledgement. For the past 4 years, our annual meeting has commenced by recognizing the Munsee Lenape people. They have been the custodians of this land since time immemorial, and we honor their enduring connection to this place. They were living here in 1609 when Henry Hudson sailed up the river they called the Mahikanac. Despite tremendous hardship in being forced from this land, today their descendants, known as the Stockbridge Munsee community, are centered in Wisconsin, and some of them are here, and they are actively preserving the languages, story, culture, and broken treaties that comprise their history. It is with gratitude and humility that we acknowledge that we are learning, speaking, and gathering on their ancestral homelands. Our commitment to preserving history and making the information available is why we're here today. The ugliness of people being forcibly removed from their homes is something that most of us would rather forget. But in the forgetting, we ignore the threads that lead us to now. Now is the time for us to learn, change, and resist these wrongs when we see them. The only way we can make redress is by telling the story of the past and listening to it with an eye to the future. As librarians, many of you can document these stories and share them with your community. Some of you are community leaders who can take action to help us build a more inclusive and equitable land for all. So I hope that you find today's discussion fulfilling and that it sparks your curiosity about how we came to be here. Let it be known how much we appreciate the work that you do for this community. As a historian once said, the major rationale for studying history is to figure out how we got here, and if we answer that question, if we have that mindset, the very next question is, so where are we going after this? And the author of that quote just happens to be our first panelist, Dr. Dave Hochfelder. So following his presentation on urban renewal, Mary and Wilbur are going to talk about the research process that they conducted in Newburgh, and then Diane and Tony will talk about telling their story in Beacon. And if we all stick to our allotted time, we'll have 15 to 20 minutes at the end to pass the microphone around for Q&A. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Dave Hochfelder.
Thanks, Carolyn. I actually don't remember saying or writing that, but it sounds good. So before I get into my PowerPoint, I want to make a few announcements that happened last week, some good things that happened last week for our project. I also want to acknowledge my two partners on our urban renewal research project, Anne Pfau, who's an independent historian and just happens to be married to me, and our colleague Stacy Sewell, who is at St. Thomas Aquinas College. The three of us collaborated with an economist at UNC Asheville to write this article, which just came out, on using urban renewal records to advance reparative justice policies. Part of my presentation will explain how urban renewal harmed residents, tenants, owner-occupiers, business owners, and so forth. I may not get through the whole presentation in the interests of sticking to the schedule, but I'm happy to make my slides and any other research material that we've accumulated over the years available to anyone. Our research project has involved 90 locations around the state of New York that had federally funded urban renewal projects. We received a National Endowment for the Humanities grant administered by the state archives to assemble folder-level inventories, and we managed to assemble those inventories for just short of 50 of the 90 locations. So this hopefully will be a repository that'll be online through the state archives website, my own personal website, and that'll showcase or make available or explain how to find, better yet, the records from these 47 locations that we are able to recover records from. Also last week, we found out that we received a Humanities New York Action Grant for about $8,000. We're collaborating with Heidi Ziemer, who is the Outreach and Digital Equity Coordinator for the Western New York Library Resources Council. This will result in an online exhibit on New York heritage, if you're familiar with that site, and then 3 traveling exhibits that'll go around the state to the 90 locations that had federally funded urban renewal projects. So if you know of any records locally in your libraries or anywhere else, please let me know. I would love to add them to the inventory. I would also love to make these records available to the public for public programming, like what Diane and her colleagues did for Beacon. If you want to get a hold of me, my email address is dhochfelder@albany.edu. If you have trouble remembering that, just go to albany.edu/history and you'll see my smiling face from 16 years ago. Feel free to, I encourage you all to take a look at this article. We're excited about it. Now I'm going to spend some time with my PowerPoint and slideshow. So I want to talk about urban renewal in New York State. As I indicated a second ago, there were 90 municipalities around the state that had federally funded urban renewal projects. And these places range in size from villages of a few thousand people, Painted Post in the southern tier, Killian in the Mohawk Valley, to New York City, obviously. And cities of all scales, villages, towns, and cities of all scales had federally funded urban renewal projects. So kind of the 30,000-foot view, the program lasted from 1949 to 1974. Originally, President Truman, who was a fairly progressive president, set up federally funded urban renewal to engage in slum clearance to eliminate so-called blight in cities around the country. Under the terms of the federal policy, the federal government paid 2/3 of the cost of the project, and these costs involved acquiring properties through eminent domain or at best negotiating with the property owners, relocating residents and businesses, and then demolishing the buildings that were on these sites. And these sites could be several hundred acres in some cases. And then after everything was cleared, the residents displaced, buildings torn down, the city would assemble these small parcels that were demolished into these larger, what were called disposition parcels, in an attempt to entice private developers to acquire the land and build something on that land. If cities were small, under 50,000 people in population, the federal government covered 3/4 of the cost. So that applies to Beacon and Newburgh. The state of New York covered half the remainder. So a city of the size of Newburgh or Beacon was on the hook for 1/8 of the total project cost. But a municipality could also defray that cost. Instead of writing $1 million check back to the federal government, the city could engage in infrastructure improvements like schools, a new sewer system, that sort of thing. One of the dodges that city officials discovered is that if they could convince the New York State Department of Transportation to build an arterial that was adjacent to an urban renewal site, the state paid the entire cost of the arterial, and the city could bank that against its local obligation to the federal government. So if you ever see two things, an arterial to nowhere, an arterial that makes no sense, that runs half a mile someplace, that's urban renewal. If you see a sea of parking lots downtown, that's disposition parcels that the municipality could not find a developer to build on. So there's always two surefire signs of urban renewal: arterials to nowhere and parking lots downtown. So nationally, over 1,200 municipalities around the country engaged in over 3,000 of these urban renewal projects. Some cities like New York City or Chicago had dozens of these projects. We estimate that about 1,350,000 people were displaced for urban renewal projects. We also estimate, as a floor, not a ceiling, that if you include urban expressways, about at a minimum, another 1 million people were displaced. So we're talking anywhere from around 2.4 million people to 3 million people displaced for these projects around the country. This is the largest forcible displacement of people in absolute numbers in the country's history. I'm not going to compare that to the internal slave trade or Native American removal, but by sheer numbers, this was the largest program of forcible displacement in the country's history. As far as top-level demographics, 60% of those displaced were non-white, 2/3 were tenants. So 1/3 were owner-occupiers and 2/3 were renters. We estimate from federal reports that around 100,000 acres were demolished, and that translates into 156 approximately square miles. Here in New York State, the federal government reserved 1.6 billion. Oh, I should go back to the top level figures. Nationally, all levels of government, local, state, and federal, spent about $20 billion on urban renewal projects in the 25-year lifespan of the program. In New York State, that figure is 1.6 billion, again, local, state, and federal funding. 91 municipalities had about 250 urban renewal projects. So that's the scope of the program nationally and around the state. I want to emphasize this. Sometimes when I give public presentations, people come in with the idea that the federal government imposed this on communities. And I want to clarify that that was not the case. The federal government simply provided the funding and overall guidance and a lot of red tape for local administrators, quite frankly. And just to emphasize this, the head of the Federal Urban Renewal Administration testified to Congress in 1973 that urban renewal is a local program, locally conceived, locally planned, and locally carried out, and that the federal role is primarily one of providing financial assistance, well, a lot of financial assistance, leadership, and general program direction. So I want to emphasize this, that urban renewal is not something imposed on a city from the outside. It was done by local officials. So it wasn't done to, it was done by, okay? That's not to absolve the federal or the state governments from their roles in these programs, but I want to emphasize that the federal government did not come into a place like Newburgh or Beacon and point to particular blocks or buildings and say, you have to tear those down. All of these just, too much coffee. All of these decisions were made locally planned, locally executed, okay? I want to run through some promotional literature. Recently did some research in the papers of Robert Moses, who is, you may know him as New York's Parks Commissioner. You may also know him as a guy who tore down a lot of New York City. And in 1945, when New York City was starting to gear up for these massive clearance and redevelopment projects, Moses issued instructions to photographers working for the city. And he basically said, make sure you get, I'm paraphrasing, make sure you get clothes on clotheslines. And you might wonder why? Like people are going green, you know. Clothes on clotheslines at the time was a sign of poverty. These people could not afford a washer and dryer. They're probably washing clothes by hand and hanging them on clotheslines outside. This was a sign of slum conditions. And again, today we'd be like, well, they're going green. So I want to take you through some of the promotional literature that cities use to convince the public in their localities that urban renewal was a good idea. This is from Kingston. Kingston had two projects, Broadway East on the left and Uptown, where the stockade is, on the right. Broadway East, down by the river, by the roundabout, was intended to clear. If you've been to Kingston and you drive down to, say, the Maritime Museum, the left-hand side of Broadway was where the urban renewal project was. And Kingston hired a photographer to come in and basically photograph these dilapidated buildings. They were dilapidated because this is in the middle of the urban renewal project, and the owners probably no longer own the buildings. But the intention was, look, this is blight, so we need to do something about it. On the right-hand side, here's Uptown. We need to preserve Uptown. So that contrast is very telling. Saratoga Springs, again, clothes on clotheslines. So Robert Moses' instructions to the City of New York photographers must have percolated to other photographers around the state, because we see a hell of a lot of pictures on clotheslines to justify urban renewal clearance. So this is Saratoga Springs. And the goal of their project was the elimination of slums and blight and the removal of their causes. This once useful and attractive area exemplifies what time and indifference will do. This area has declined to a point where it is a liability rather than an asset. So this is a glance at the present as seen from the early 60s. The future, nice, shiny new buildings. This is a housing project, and on the left-hand side at the top is kind of an artist's depiction of the building, and the lower right shows kind of a happy view of the outdoor grounds, and you see kids on the left-hand side on that balcony or stairway. So the intention was to contrast blight with this glorious new future. Ilion, and it's okay if you've never heard of Ilion. It's a village on the Mohawk River. Remington Arms was headquartered there for a long time. It's a small place, but they had a massive urban renewal project downtown. And again, this promotional brochure shows a typical middle-class white family, mother, father, young son, young daughter, portrayed as upper middle class. And this is intended to recruit or entice this kind of family to relocate to Ilion as a result of its urban renewal program. This is White Plains, and this is a model. Models often, municipal officials often commission the construction of these models for a few $1,000s. And they're tabletop size, maybe 4 feet by 6 feet. And they would take this model of this new future and display it publicly in, public libraries, banks, furniture stores, et cetera. The Kingston Broadway East model got displayed at about half a dozen local businesses. This model is sort of like, the way that I describe it is, when you go to the store and you buy a box of cake mix and there's a picture of the cake on the box, this is a serving suggestion. This is what you could do with the contents of this box. It's not necessarily what your cake's going to look like. So none of these buildings were actually planned. This is just like an artist's depiction of, if you get the right architect with the right vision, this could be built. But more often than not, these models never reflected what was actually built. If you're familiar with Poughkeepsie, this is the Rip Van Winkle Tower, I believe. And The caption is Poughkeepsie is awake. Again, the Rip Van Winkle connection. This design was considered architecturally progressive at the time. I don't know how well it stood the test of time, but this was a housing development that was considered to be architecturally progressive. So again, contrasting current blight conditions with this new modernist future. I want to talk about some of the local urban renewal records we found in the about the 5 minutes I have remaining. One of the key sources are these relocation cards, relocation files. We have found relocation files like this in around 25 municipalities. Last week, we found the relocation files, some of them, for Lincoln Center in Manhattan. We're really excited about that find. These relocation cards provide really fine-grained information about households. And the files that these cards are in often contain correspondence to, from, or about the household. And you can really get into the social history of urban renewal with these records. I made a mistake here, and I should have blacked out the name of the head of family, so I apologize for that. I do want to point out a couple features of this card. On the lower left, where it says present housing, length of residence in Schenectady, length of residence in same unit. One of the reasons that municipal officials collected this information was to try and trim their welfare rolls. So if someone had just moved to a particular locality, that could be a justification. If they were on public support, it could be a justification for cutting them from the welfare rolls. I want to talk briefly, this is based on the Russell Sage Foundation article that we just published, how urban renewal harmed people who were displaced. And there are four major ways. First of all, this is a subsidy from the people who were displaced to affluent, powerful, usually white people. So a lot of urban renewal projects tore down inner city neighborhoods to build things like urban expressways, entertainment complexes, sports venues, etc. So this was intended to entice the affluent white middle class back downtown. So one way to think about it is the costs borne by the people displaced. Economist Anthony Downs in the 60s estimated that this amounted to about $300 per displaced person. So that's a huge subsidy. Secondly, until the passage of a law in 1970, when the program was essentially almost over, people who were relocated, both tenants, owner-occupiers, and business owners, received inadequate compensation. Often people who were relocated, tenants who were relocated, had to find quarters in more expensive apartments. Rents went up about 25% on average for displaced tenants. So there was no provision for that. Business owners, same thing. There was no provision for compensating business owners for what was called goodwill. That is, if you operated a small grocery store in a neighborhood for 30 years, you built up a clientele. If you were forced into a new location, you would have to start that process over again. Owner-occupiers were often inadequately compensated through the appraisal process, but more seriously than the appraisal process was two things. Contract sales, that is, especially African-American home buyers, could not get mortgages, and particular neighborhoods were redlined. So in order to buy a house, a lot of poor or African-American would-be homeowners had to buy what was called on contract, highly exploitive agreements where the homeowners, the prospective buyers, paid a monthly installment for about 15 years at an inflated price. And if they missed a payment, they weren't building equity. If they missed a payment, they could be evicted as if they were tenants. Highly exploitive practice. I would encourage you to read an article that came out in Saturday Evening Post called Confessions of a Blockbuster, which explains how this worked in Chicago. Secondly, what was called condemnation blight. So people knew an urban renewal project, let's take Newburgh. In the late 50s, people knew there was an urban renewal project that was going to happen in the Water Street downtown area. So people stopped maintaining their buildings. And when the city finally acquired these properties in the early 60s, vandals had broken in and stolen the pipes, the copper wiring, and so forth. So a building that might have been worth $15,000 in 1958 would have been appraised at, say, $10,000 5 years later. Finally, businesses who were forced to relocate, especially businesses that had catered to a neighborhood clientele, barbershops, grocery stores, bars and grills, businesses like that, shoe repair shops, they could not restart. About 35 to 40% estimated, research estimated this in the 60s, 35 to 40% of businesses forced out were unable to successfully start up again. A lot of these businesses were owned by elderly people who were basically forced into premature retirement. And then no compensation for the loss of the market or the business, the goodwill that the business had built up over the years. How am I doing on time, Carolyn? All right. So I'm not going to take you through the rest of the slides. I would encourage you to contact me or anyone else here who's got access to the PowerPoint to get the slides. This is one of my favorite photographs. This is from Kingston, the B&F market. The owner kept this market open through the demolition of the Broadway East Urban Renewal Project area, and finally closed, and there was essentially nobody left in the neighborhood. And you see the market with the demolition happening in the background. The business owner made a conscious effort to stay in the neighborhood in order to still serve the people remaining. So some final thoughts to take away as I conclude. I want to emphasize again the importance of these local urban renewal records. These are held by the city clerk or the city planning department or the urban renewal agency if it still exists. Could be called the community development agency or economic development agency. Those records may still exist. State Archives guidance says they can be destroyed after 6 years from project closeout, but as a result of the inventorying work we did, the new records retention guidelines say that they should be evaluated for historical significance. So public libraries and local historical societies may also have vertical files of newspaper clippings or photographs that someone took. So those are important sources as well. I also want to emphasize the importance of the community and community elders and the collective memory of these projects. Very important. And we should honor the perspective of community elders. And I also want to emphasize that, again, all levels of government bear responsibility for this. Federal government provided the bulk of the funding, the state helped out, and local governments planned and executed these projects. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Dave. And I will quickly note that I have the presentations from everybody's presentations today, and I'm putting them on that same website that Gina had you all pull up in the beginning, so you should be able to access them there. Save that. Okay. All right, next up, we have Mary McTamaney. All right, it's all yours.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, and let me real quick just unmute. Zach, did you unmute everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to my hometown up there. I'm the city historian in Newburgh, and I've lived in Newburgh for 77 years. And I've lived in East Newburgh, where much of this happened for all of that time. And today, Wilbur Higgins and I once were neighbors almost, and now live in different zones because of urban renewal, but still know each other and our stories, are here to kind of give you, I'll give you an overview with pictures, and then we're happy to answer questions. Dave Hochfelder just gave you a really good, fine, professional overview of urban renewal, a synopsis of what happened in 20th century America. In that movement that we no longer use as a term. Urban renewal was so devastating. I doubt that it will be a government term for generations to come. So what went wrong? I am asked perpetually as the city historian, and many of you probably are at your research and reference desks. What happened? Whoa, people say to me. Young people who've never seen the community whole, newcomers, immigrants, You look around a city that had the urban renewal experience, and there is plainly something missing. There is plainly a disconnect. There are maps that just make no sense in your head as you walk the streets. And so you can ask historians like us what was brewing in our communities, because some of it was universal, most of it was surprising. It was basically a massive, perfect storm of changing times. Mid-century America was turning, it was spinning. It was making lots of new decisions without the grounding of its own story and history. There were big, quick shifts in everything, from national supply chains, transportation networks, and Diane's going to say to me, oh, there you are. That's the one they always blame, transportation. But all of these issues did have an impact. There was such a revolution of rising expectation. Wilbur and Tony and I went on to school beyond high school. Nobody in our families were able to do that before. So the world was opening during the baby boom. And old injustices, meanwhile, that were very quiet in little family and neighborly circles, were beginning to have an impact. And so the underlying current, as you kind of hinted from Dave, and as you'll hear from Diane, and as all of you know from your own community stories, racism and grift and greed was a massive driving factor. And because everything was spinning, it was easy to implement those feelings in the way that you were trying to address solutions. So despite the shared experiences of change and destruction and loss, no two of our communities were the same, not even Newburgh and Beacon shaking hands across the river. Also, there was no local control of the massive federal funding, which Dave hinted at. It didn't turn out well. There were no plans imposed. There were few benchmarks required. There were no federal officials, or rarely, that came visiting and inspecting and saying, how you doing? Is this working out the way we all thought nationally? Millions flowed freely while it lasted. It really lasted until we sucked up all the federal money with the Vietnam War. That's what ended urban renewal, Vietnam. I think the Great Society would have continued to crush and pillage inner cities for many more years had we not had to divert our money. So where do we go for these post-mortem facts? Residents like Wilbur and Tony watched the changes live in a front seat. Frankly, so did I. Now locally, historians like Diane and me, and all of the librarians in the local public school and historical society reference desks, need to keep looking with every new and intriguing question that comes to us about this time. My advice is to approach the topic like this with lots of curiosity, because new facts will continually emerge. Also approach it with that diplomatic code of trust but verify, because you will not always find the truth in people's stories, even if they're remembering grandma. You won't find it in public documents always, unless you're deep into the nitty-gritty statistics. But the promotional documents, and I have some up here when we all break and are ready for lunch. Diane and Tony create a beautiful exhibit, which they had on display in Beacon. I've just brought handfuls of things, but some of them are the old urban renewal reports, the old statistical reports. Look through that vocabulary and you realize how skewed it is. It wasn't really written by Robert Moses. It was written by, the president of the Urban Renewal Agency in Newburgh, but it's the same mindset. And so where to begin to look? Let me show you in some of the slides I brought. Find what you used to look like. So here's Newburgh when I was born. That is a dense, rich community. Here it is from the river. There is nothing, not one brick in this photograph left standing. That's how much we took ourselves apart. This is it now. And so how did you go from that to that? This vast amount of 50 acres of riverfront grass, what did that accomplish? If you're a bird, you say, well, it's kind of clean and neat and good for Newburgh. But if you're anybody else, there is no longer any resource happening there. That we destroyed in my city 1,320 tax-paying parcels. What could we have done in the last 50 years with taxes from 1,320 places that we didn't do? What did we lose by not having that income? Here's Water Street, part of Water Street. This is what I shopped as a child. Here's Colden Street, which leads from the foot of Broadway downhill, also where I shopped as a child. Here's Broadway, because the streets led into our big wide Main Street, and look at the number of marquee signs and the amount of, difference, variety to what was offered to the community from a main street. Now that was bound to change. The times were changing, and that was bound to change. We wouldn't always have had all mom and pop stores. But once we took their buildings down, there was no hope of having that. We went from, there's Colden Street at the foot of Broadway. You sometimes ride it, some of you perhaps, come down, turn left, and you used to go down to the shore where you would get on the ferry, the steamboat, the trolley, the train. And then we started bulldozing it. Well, we have a better idea. And as Dave explained, if we bundle some parcels, maybe we can build something big and cool. We were constantly shopping for the big, cool development. And so we went from this on Front Street to that. All of those shops, and now parking up against a railroad trestle. We went from streets like this as you entered Newburgh from our river gateway. This is a policeman standing directing traffic because there was that much traffic. There was that much interaction of people coming and going constantly at our river gate. And so that's 3rd Street. There is no more 3rd Street. Under that grassy slope is what used to be. So you're looking at a street that went from the shore all the way up the hill into central Newburgh. We not only took everything down on it, we bulldozed the street too. So we have 9 streets that existed when I was born that aren't at all. You can't find them. They're underground. This is what Diane and I, historians, know was the gateway to community. In 1835, everything came and went at the river. Still came and went at the river in 1885. Now there's more water transit. But the cities were big and they matched each other. They shook hands hourly across the river. The ferry took people in and out. So here is a photo coming in to Newburgh from the ferry, and you can see how dense everything was downtown. That's how people got around. They rode aboard a car ferry and landed at our shore. It was fun because I was young. And it was slow, which frustrated the adults in my life. And eventually, because the river changes, it was also impossible on some days. If you worked in DuPont but lived in Beacon, you were late for work. If you worked at Texaco and lived in Newburgh, you were late for work because you didn't fit on the ferry or the ferry got stuck in the ice. And so these big fellas were retired with that kind of a dense schedule. Now look at what the ferry goes, 4 times over and 4 times back in the evening. This is how often people were communicating in our downtowns. So it isn't just what were we doing alone, but what were we doing as a neighborhood because the whole riverfront bay was a neighborhood. And then the ferry closes and we let everything go. Dave described how fast that can happen. And so everything that came apart and disappeared was not torn down. Sometimes it was just neglected, demolition by neglect. Our ferry was burned down by kids who were playing in it. We didn't have a train anymore. Once you don't use your downtown, you don't need to ride into your downtown from New York anymore. New York Central came and went just as frequently as the ferry did. It's gone. So now you want to ride to New York on the train, you got to cross the river, but how? You got to get in your car and ride all the way around. And then there's the human factor. It isn't just the structural change in a community. It's also the human change. So as we got to that point where things aren't working well, we've lost some of our neighborhood, we've lost some of our neighbors, we've lost some of our businesses, what's going on? Our city council gets nervous, and their worst, as often happens, their worst instincts come to the fore. So here is a quartet of people who made a very bad impact on me and everybody who lived in Newburgh since. This is 3 of our city council members, and in the center is a man named Joe Mitchell. Joseph McDowell Mitchell was hired as our city manager when our regular city manager got a better job up in Albany, and suddenly into town without a lot of reference checking, without a lot of background by some, with understanding that by these 3 guys of who they were getting, came a man who only stayed for 2 years and left us to join the White Citizens Council as an executive. Find the story called The Battle of Newburgh on YouTube and listen and watch what was going on at the beginning of the 1960s. So it isn't just that the Fed's out there, that HUD is out there, that money is flowing from the federal government to communities. It's also that you can have a really bad actor infect you like a virus. And this man was bad. This man created a conversation that was nationwide. It went over to Europe and back as a conversation about poor people, Black people, unworthy people, and turned all of our worry about how badly we were slipping economically into a struggle of us versus them. And all the thems were the poorer, the darker, the weaker, the less contributing Newburghers. I don't think without Joe Mitchell, we would have descended as fast as we did. We wouldn't have bought into urban renewal as much as we did because we weren't as weak as he made us. There he is. So look him up, Joe Mitchell and the Battle of Newburgh. And that's what happened. This is the sign that I remember standing at when I was a little kid ready to get on the ferry. And now it is emblematic of where we went, that this is the all-American city now rotting into the river. That's Water Street, where I shopped only 10 years earlier. Now there's weeds growing in the curbs and there's boards over the windows. We've got lots of these pictures. This is the road to the train station. This is the part of the block that leads you to the New York Central Station. It's now the pizza shop. Some of you have maybe been there, and the taco shop. The bridge came in and the bridge closed our gates. Diane and I can attest to that. That unlike a lot of other national communities with urban renewal, in the case of ours, once we built the bridge to get us out of the ice and to work on time at Texaco, we also closed the gate at the shore, and people didn't come and go any more there, and that made that whole economy tumble. So the cop who's waiting to direct you on and off the ferry, he's out of a job. The whole street is out of a job. The whole street is soon neglected and buried. This is heading toward my neighborhood. This is the one building left standing, and it still is. This is the Regal Bag Factory, made hot pocketbooks, built in 1840s as a steam mill. And there's my grandfather's house. My grandfather came out the upstairs window of that house in 1888 and slid from his bedroom down on the snow in the great blizzard of 88. That this is the old-time Reed family house on Water Street, and beside it is what it looks like now. There's Wilbur's house. You're going to meet Wilbur in a minute when you ask questions. That might be him playing out in front. That's right across the street on the other side of Water Street, and there's what his property looks like now. This is my block where I live now. This is Joe and Julia Smith's house and their kids playing out in front. And Joe and Julia make a perfect study of what a striving middle-class Black family, both working, were accomplishing and where they lived. And the bulldozers were starting, and the acquiring block after block for the dream developer who never came was beginning. And so they had started marching down my block and took the first 3 houses. And that's one of the first 3. And now is a picture of what it is. Some very poorly maintained trees and a dumpster outside of an apartment complex. At least something was built. Now, how do you find the information you need about your communities? Read everything and read media. You've probably remember being taught that in archive and library courses. Read everything in media, the door signs, the models of, I always use my Motorhead friends to date a photograph. What model car is that? What year is that? What brands and products are being sold? How old are those cars? How are the streets maintained? Is there any occupancy upstairs still? How do you look at what was coming apart and understand it? This is a sad picture. It's like one that Dave showed in Kingston. This is the bulldozers working. Actually, they weren't bulldozers. They were the swinging wrecking ball, the giant cast iron ball, flying through the air and bashing everything and making it really unhealthy and unsafe. But in the middle, in that blue spot, is Ida Robinson. That's Robinson's Lounge, which she and her husband did not give up for the longest time. And she is outside heading in. There are 2 flower pots. The awning, the sign is still fresh. What was it like to be Ida Robinson in the mid-60s? Merrill Robinson, her son, went to school with us, graduated in the class of 64 from Newburgh High School. We didn't realize when Merrill walked home in the afternoon that he was going to that much dust and destruction. Most of us just couldn't comprehend how wild this was. Look at pictures and figure out who's standing, just like Ida. Who are those businesses? Can you find descendants of those names? You will. Look at what's happening. Who's at the bank door there? That beautiful old marble bank. What's he loading? He's not a contractor in that old car. He's a looter. And so you begin to see in the detail of a picture what the heck is happening. Who's the crane company? Who are the officials posted on a sign? Start to find that descendant company. Start to find those people. You will. Last month I found 3 brothers who are descendants of the Mitchell Company, which was one of the demo and trucking companies. And then start to go back to primary documents. These are the city council proceedings for 1948. This was the beginning of urban renewal. This is when we made the first resolutions that we were joining in and applying for federal money. And the first money Newburgh spent was about $375 to get a Dun & Bradstreet rating so that we could apply for the money. Look at what else was changing outside the zone you're studying and with what justification, because it's often integrated in planning, faulty planning. Sketch out what was happening for yourself. I just took the phone book map and started to draw what was missing. Then I look at more detailed maps. You'll find them. We librarians can lead people to them. And then look in the newspapers, because sometimes an article that doesn't seem to be about your topic of urban renewal is, this is Joe Costa, and he's complaining about just what Dave described, this building of crazy highways to nowhere. They were going to do 2 blocks of wide Lake Street, an arterial with nothing on either end. And when you see Joe, he's saying, this is like Ripley's Believe It or Not. Why are we doing this? Find Joe. I did before he died. He's the one who told me that he and his brother, who ran the local soda company, had to stop, not because they were going to tear his building down, but because Amstar wouldn't sell him sugar anymore at a quantity that he could handle. There are all these marvelous sidebar stories that begin to tell us what mid-century America and urban renewal was all about. Look at the actual appraisals. Dave has the originals of these up in Albany. See what it tells you about the people who were there and the building that was there. Make yourself a database. I did that with a lot of the information that I found. So this begins, those relocation files, this begins to tell me how many people were in the household, how many hours a week did they work, where did they work? The whole myth of the poor people with the laundry on the line who were impoverished, the Joe Mitchell trope, that these are all derelict, these are people that we want to move out anyway. These were all working people. They had lower and middle class jobs, but look how hard they were working when you see where they were. And then who's planning? How did they acquire what they planned? What was planned to be? Where are the streets that you knew? How many times do you find things that change and change and change for naught, that nothing really became of it? So how much of the budget went into that? Jane Jacobs, if you haven't read Death and Life of an American City, designing a city is easy, she said a half century ago. Rebuilding a living one takes imagination. And so find the pictures, see who drew them. That's Frank Gehry, the famous architect, but he started his career in Newburgh. And then look at the consequences. Our records manager is here, Steve, and he found this letter not long ago. We've run into a very serious problem on the Key Bank site concerning debris and garbage that were left buried. Oops, we may not be able to build after all. 25 years later, we forgot to take out all the trash. So I'm only giving you pictures to give you a sense of where do you look? Because people want, just like we did when we were kids, people want pictures and stories. When you are asked a question, they want raw data, but they especially want context. And as librarians, you're going to be the people to give them that context. That PBS this week aired a documentary about Clive Davis. I hadn't really paid a lot of attention to him in my life. He was a big music mogul. He was called in the documentary the man with the golden ear because he could perceive when he heard any new artist or any instrumental group, what would be the most dynamic aspects, what would be the most successful aspects of that music. So you guys have to be the librarians with the golden ears, but also the librarians with the golden brains, because everything you're going to seek will not be obvious on the keyboard, in the screen, or on the shelves. You have to think of what else, what other part of the story did I just hear about? Oh, and then see if you can find what will enrich everyone, because we need this story and we need its details, and together we need to compile it. Now, I don't know if you will ask us questions of each of our communities as we stop or together when we're finished. If you want to ask anything about Newburgh of Wilbur and myself, or if you'd prefer to talk about Beacon now and then ask questions of all of us. Good.
All right. Thank you, Mary. So next up, we have Diane Lapis from Beacon. And as Mary said, we will have Q&A. We're still on good time for Q&A at the end. So please hold your questions. Okay, all you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Diane Lapis from the Beacon Historical Society, and I wanted to talk about how we took the information that Mary talks about and Professor Hochfelder, and how we told the story through our Historical Society. So we teamed up with a number of partners in order to research and tell the complex story of Beacon's West End and urban renewal projects. Beacon's first and most ambitious urban renewal project involved evicting and relocating a predominantly Black neighborhood in the West End. All told, urban renewal claimed 142 buildings, 205 homes, and 35 businesses, while building over 500 units of new housing for low to middle income and for those displaced and the elderly. So on a much smaller scale than Newburgh. We started with a small collection from the Society archives. We knew that newspaper clippings, government documents, and a smattering of photos were not enough to capture the compelling and controversial actions of urban renewal and its effects on the community. So we worked with the library, specifically Michelle Rivas, who's a community engagement librarian, and she's here today. Michelle, raise your hand. And we worked with Leonard Sparks at the Highland Currents newspaper, and Brooke and Reuben Simmons from IM Beacon, as well as Connie Pedro, a former resident of the West End community, alongside a host of community members and organizations in order to recount the story. So the idea here is not to work in isolation, always work with community partners. So first, our volunteers at the Historical Society culled our materials that were located in disparate locations in our archives. We looked through photo files, we organized newspaper clippings into 6 albums in date order, we organized the real estate appraisals, etc. In the end, what started out as a small file ended up as a substantial collection with all the items in archival sleeves and folders, labeled and accessible to researchers. Putting everything in order helped us to better understand and tell the story in chronological order. We also then had a sense of what materials were available to exhibit. And here are some photos that we found from the files, including protesters, city officials, community organizers, and local residents. Our team members, aside from Ms. Pedro, who had lived through the changes that I'm going to say UR instead of urban renewal, to save time, brought to her neighborhood, were unfamiliar with what happened in Beacon during the 1960s and 70s. Professor Hochfelder and his team of researchers met us to understand the importance of our archives and brainstorm ideas for the exhibition. Professor Hochfelder provided support and materials throughout the project and helped create our inventory of our UR resources for the New York State database that he mentioned earlier. We also met with the Beacon Housing Authority to learn about the low and middle income housing units that were developed. Veronica Shetter, the director, kindly lent us a 3D model of Forrestal Heights, which Professor Hochfelder mentioned earlier. The largest of the Forrestal Heights was the largest of the developments that were built, as well as a scrapbook that was meticulously created by a staff member from the inception of the project in the 70s. And this was an invaluable research tool. Our team decided to tell the story of urban renewal through a multi-pronged approach. The Historical Society created an exhibition from a chronological perspective using our archival materials as well as oral histories. The Society's exhibition included informational display panels, which are behind you, government-produced documents, photographs, flyers, advertisements, newspaper articles, oral histories, 3D models, and other artifacts. Also included was a 12-minute video clip from the film Lines of Demarcation that included interviews of elders in our community recollecting urban renewal and its impact on their lives, as well as a slideshow of 25 photographs which ran on a continuous loop portraying youngsters that participated in the summer programs at St. Andrew's Church. I'll be discussing both of those in later slides. We knew that the Historical Society's exhibition would only scratch the surface of the West End story. It was important to hear the voices of those that lived there and could share their experiences. That's where Brooke and Reuben Simmons of I Am Beacon came in. I Am Beacon is a local not-for-profit service organization that, among many other projects, hosts the podcast series This is Beacon. They created 2 podcasts about urban renewal. The first one featured an interview with Professor Hochfelder, who acted as a guide, as he did this morning, on the history of urban renewal through the lens of federal and New York State governments. In addition, Connie Perdreau shared her unique perspective on urban renewal's impact on Beacon's West End neighborhood. In the second episode, Brooke and Reuben shared their reflections on the first podcast alongside other interviews with a number of residents, including Tony, that were affected by urban renewal and the dissolution of their neighborhood. Professor Hochfelder provided a lecture and slideshow on the history of and implications of urban renewal in Beacon, as well as state and federal level at the library. And this program, which was held to a packed audience of standing room only. While the Historical Society told the story of urban renewal from a chronological perspective, the library set out to paint a portrait of the West End community before urban renewal. Based on interviews with Connie, images of her home, family, and neighborhood were used in the exhibition. They exemplified a typical family in the West End, starting with her uncle and parents' migration from the South in the 1930s and 40s, home life, and the importance of community and religion. The month-long exhibit also included family photos and quotes from interviews with community members and photos from the West End from real estate appraisals. Following the Portrait of a Community exhibition, the Beacon Library held a second one that featured engaging photographs of youngsters taken at a summer recreation program at St. Andrew's Church in 1966. The photographer had answered an advertisement in the Village Voice that read, quote, "Workers needed now in a racially torn city," unquote. Much of that racial tension had to do with the fight over, you guessed it, urban renewal. To our surprise and delight, 58 years later, the man that answered the ad, Michael Robb, reconnected with Beacon and shared his story and photographs with us. The photos were taken in the style of his hero, Henry Cartier-Bresson, capturing the mood, action, and relationships of the children that summer. A 20-minute video of Rob and Mrs. Moneymaker, his host that summer at the church, was also presented at the exhibition. You can see a photo of Michael Robb. Is this thing working? There it is. There's Michael. And that was David Quill, who's this little boy here, 58 years later. In 2022, Leonard Sparks, a writer for our local newspaper and the Highlands Current, wrote an award-winning 5-part series called Always Present, Never Seen, A Black History of the Highlands. Leonard interviewed a number of residents and used research materials from the Historical Society and the Beacon Library's History Room. The articles helped to put urban renewal into historic context as it related to our local Black community. Leonard also created a timeline for urban renewal based on the newspaper articles. His excellent reporting also helped promote the programs at the library and the Historical Society. And you can see all of these on their website. Coincidentally, while our team was researching and gearing up for programming on urban renewal, The Rise Up project was taking place at St. Andrew's Church. Rise Up is a congressional ministry that teamed up with the Beacon High School students and a faculty advisor. Together, they work with local filmmakers and the Historical Society to conduct research, interview senior citizens from Beacon's Black communities, and created a film specifically about urban renewal. The film was screened 4 times, included moderated panel discussions with interviewees, the filmmakers, historians, and student participants, reaching an audience of nearly 300 people. Tony was one of the guest speakers in the film, and I'm going to ask Tony if you can speak now about your experience working with the students, as well as your time in Beacon during the urban renewal process.
As Diane stated, I had the privilege to work with the students from Beacon High School to talk about my life as a young man growing up in Beacon and going through this urban renewal. And I can remember, I was 13 years old. My friend and I, we had a paper route. So we used to walk up and down Beekman Street, which is now a highway that runs through that community. But Beekman Street, South Avenue, Ferry Street, River Street. As a young man, I knew everyone in those neighborhoods. Like delivering the Poughkeepsie, the Beacon paper, and then going around on a weekly basis to collect the $2 for that delivery service. It was devastating to me as time grew, and I went into the service. And I came back in 1972, that my whole neighborhood had changed. It was all those houses and buildings and stores that I grew up with. They were all gone. And as a good doctor said, that the only thing that was there was the highway. Route 9D ran, from north, Wappers Falls through Cold Spring. And pretty much that was it. I can remember, when I was in Vietnam, sitting in a foxhole, thinking about coming back home and going to Lewis's sandwich shop and having a couple of hot dogs and chocolate milk, and that was like running through my head. And when I got home, Lewis's was gone. All that whole neighborhood, my barber shop, my delicatessen, my pool hall. The only thing left was St. Andrew's Episcopal Church, where I grew up on a playground, playing basketball and going to service. Actually being an altar boy with Father Moneymaker. All of my friends who grew up with me are no longer in Beacon. Their homes were torn down, and their families decided to leave Beacon. For some reason, I don't know, my family stayed, and I've been in town now for 76 years and counting. And I probably will never leave, and I'll die in Beacon. But basically that's it. As the doctor says, the thing that stood in my mind is like all of this is gone. The river views, all the folks that I grew up with, they're no longer there. And, I go down to Charleston, South Carolina now to visit my friends. I go out to Vegas, Florida. They're all over the country. But, Beacon's still my home, and it will always be my home. So that's it.
Thank you, Tony. I think the important thing he talks about is the loss of community that you can't regain once it's gone, it's gone. As mentioned earlier, a key member of our team included Connie Pedro, a former trustee of the Historical Society, and more importantly, a former resident of the West End. Connie provided invaluable assistance in understanding the West End community. Her role as a museum educator was instrumental in ensuring the success of the programming. Her knowledge of the past and recent history of Beacon, familiarity with community members, and ability to liaise with community groups were invaluable. She also culled material from the Historical Society collection, created a database, and provided materials from her personal collection. These items were added to the Diversity and Collaborative Knowledge Program funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And here are some of Connie's photos from her album. You can see Connie right here, and again here, and here. The Historical Society provides educational programs for schools and senior citizen groups. Here, a group of 2nd through 4th graders are engaged in an activity whereby they're creating their own urban renewal projects. After learning about how the West End was demolished, they were given a map of the area and brainstormed ideas for recreating a city with things that were important to them, such as parks, schools, and a church. Aside from the Museum Educator Grant, the Beacon Historical Society received funding to scan and create a database of urban renewal materials from our archives. These were uploaded to Consider the Source, a free online community that connects educators across New York State to valuable sources, with a series of learning activities designed to guide and encourage students to make discoveries using critical thinking skills. Today, the Historical Society is in the process of providing urban renewal materials to the New York Heritage digital collections with the support of Southeastern. We plan to use the database created from the Consider the Source project as a starting point for the New York Heritage Collection. The West End project was very impactful on so many levels. It opened a door on a time and place that had been closed for over 50 years. Newcomers to our community had no idea that there was a West End. All the buildings are gone and the roads just don't exist. Former residents had the opportunity to share and reminisce about their community and help others to understand what it meant to lose that sense of community. Working together with the team and other organizations helped us to give the urban renewal story the justice that it deserved. Not one of us could tell it without the richness and depth that was provided by the others. If you plan to research and tell your town or city's urban renewal stories, we highly recommend finding the right people or groups to work with to tell the story in all its complexities. Now, the Historical Society has a rich record and resources available to future researchers. To learn more about this project and links to the podcasts and professors' lectures, etc., visit our website. Thank you so much.
I'm not going to start at the beginning because I'm going to start where Newburgh downfall, shall we say.
Mary, let's start. Yeah,
I was trying to find one that would work for him, yeah.
Hello?
Oh, good.
Is that on?
The red one, third room one.
The red one.
This one's on. There we go.
One day I came home from college and my street, Water Street, was completely gone. Not a building on it. It's quite a shock after growing up there on Water Street. It's a very diverse population. A wonderful place to grow up. As kids, we played with each other, went in each other's houses and ate dinner and had our own playground there. We had our own neighborhood school there, but it was all gone, disappeared. My family was, I think, the first to move uptown from urban renewal. We moved to Chamber Street, which was a tree-lined street back then. Beautiful street. And that's where I started seeing Newburgh go downhill. People were being put out of their homes because the owners, the renters, wanted the money. And they were put out and they moved uptown to Chamber Street, Johnson Street, Lander Street, and those streets became the downfall of Newburgh. drugs, prostitution. It was just a terrible place. And it's still not a great place to live, but people have to live somewhere. Newburgh had one bad street that I know of growing up. That was Hudson Street, which was on the north end of Water Street. As kids, our parents told us, do not go on Hudson Street. It's a bad place to be. And one of the things I learned today was my mother used to wash clothes in her washing machine and then put them on the line because she said the air will make it dry better. But now I know I lived in a slum. But Newburgh, working for the city of Newburgh for 36 years, I saw a lot of things happen that shouldn't have happened and some good things that did happen. A lot of Newburgh's problems may result from the lack of politicians, people who stand up for the people and for the community. But that was out of my hands. I'm not going to do about it. I think all of you know that Washington headquarters is here in Newburgh. And I think the people from Urban Renewal took George Washington's last words as he sat on his big white steed and started getting ready to leave Newburgh. This is a joke that goes around Newburgh. And he spoke to the people and said, don't do anything till I come back. So I think Urban Renewal is the same thing. Learned that very well. Any questions?
Thank you. Yes, has anybody told the story of second, much lesser migration that happens because of urban renewal in these towns?
Second migration. What do you mean by second migration?
Well, where people are moving.
Tony.
When they get displaced.
Yeah, I think in the city of Beacon, when we went through this process, a lot of the, which I call now projects, had developed. Where the black folks who lived on the West End, part of that new housing that they built, South Davis Terrace, and Forrestal Heights. And Forrestal, mainly low income. It was built in 1970. We had, I think it's 245 apartments there. And then we have a second low income property that we manage today. It's called Ham Fish Plaza. But that was built, that only came around in 1990. And I think we have 165 apartments there. But they're mainly, low income. I think that's one of the things that we're focusing on now, and as part of the planning board, is this to build more affordable housing in Beacon. When you, some of those properties that were on Beekman Street that stayed vacant for a long time. Now, you go down Beekman Street today, they got condominiums that are selling for $1 million. So the local folks can't afford to live there. And there's another plot of land that stayed vacant for a long time. It's called West End Lofts. And, 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartments, but, the commoner can't afford to live there. So that's the main issue now. So yeah, we're working with the state. There's a place downstate. There was a women's prison that closed. So we're working with the state now to try to go in and develop that, hopefully for some low income housing or middle income housing.
So if I can also add to what Tony just said, This was a major, should I use a microphone? I probably should.
Those are taped down.
Oh.
So you just have what Sarah has in her hand here. Yeah, those are for the internet. They're not gonna
okay.
they're not gonna amplify the room.
Is this better? Relocation was a major issue during urban renewal, nationally and around the state. Low and moderate income housing projects were built, but what we know generally is that urban renewal destroyed more housing units than they replaced, especially for low and moderate income families. So there are very few places around the country that built enough replacement housing to replace the housing that was demolished. Sometimes that was intentional, like in the case of Newburgh and Joseph Mitchell that Mary explained. This was an intentional attempt to basically destroy the Black neighborhood, and with very little provision for rehousing displaced families. So I'll just point that out. As far as local records, if you can find the relocation files for the places you live in through the city archives, municipal archives, those relocation files will often tell you where families relocated. We know in the case of one household in Newburgh, just to give an example, Gilbert Sharp, we write about him in the Russell Sage Foundation article we just published. They were moved several times. First to an apartment with no hot water and no bathtub. And then they were relocated again because there was a second urban renewal project in Newburgh, the East Newburgh project. So they were relocated twice. And that's not uncommon. It's not the majority of households, but a lot of households were relocated several times to get out of the way of follow-on urban renewal projects.
Can I add something?
One of the things that's very destructive about this era in urban renewal is the way it created a mean-spirited competition. That if you could get out the gate first off your block, you might have more options. If you dawdled, if you thought about it, if you couldn't find the resources you need, you had fewer options. People who were steadfast did not win. And I talked to one man who lived up in Wilbur's neighborhood years ago, and he said, when I moved here, I came from Lower Montgomery Street because urban renewal took my property, and this was another part of this project that they would take where you lived. They would offer you a new place that they owned because they had taken that too, and they knew they didn't even have the capacity or the budget flow to take down as many buildings as they seized. So I'll take yours today, I'll move you into this one till next year, and then I'll be taking that again, and then I'll be taking that again. That's what I mean about being first out of the gate. And so this gentleman and his family who were in a house that they were renting now from the Urban Renewal Agency, knowing they wouldn't stay forever. So you kept hearing knocks on the door. What do you got to sell? Well, I don't have anything to sell. This isn't my house. Get out of here. He said by the third or fourth knock, you said, oh, what the hell? I'll sell them the newel post. I'll sell them the surround on the fireplace. I might as well make a little money as I'm moving out because I can watch that wrecking ball coming for us. And nobody's going to save this stuff. I might as well get a little money to compensate my pain. And so it corrupted such a neighborliness that we used to have. It's one of the great tragedies.
Diane had something.
Yeah, good. Just want to add that I mentioned before we moved up to Chambers Street, the tree-lined street. When people started moving out, the people who lived in these houses, or one-family houses, they moved out. The new people coming in were all from downtown, and they turned these one-family houses into 5-family apartments. So that's what displacement did.
Beacon the local city officials were very proud to announce that they had more housing units available. I think they created over 500 units, but that was for low and middle income. What the problem, and I'm sure Tony would agree, was for people of middle and higher income levels, like people that worked at IBM or Texaco. They tried to buy homes in the East End, and they were dismissed due to racial discrimination.
Yeah, you know, well, I mean, it is so disheartening for folks to who wanted to purchase a home or build a new home. I mean, you know, just the red tape that we had to go through to make that happen. Again, my family was fortunate that we weren't affected by urban renewal. My street, I mean, they went right past our street, and so the home that I kind of grew up with is still there today. I mean, I ride by there and I show my grandkids where I grew up. But yeah, it was just I don't know. It's very disheartening. You know, when I go back to that neighborhood now and see the new development that has taken place, and the cost of these new houses up there, they're just unbearable. You got people coming up from the city that's buying these places now. Now we call Beacon, Brooklyn South, because all the folks from the city is coming up. So,
Any other questions?
Let me just say one other thing. You're going to have to do some of your own research as researchers for the patrons and people who come to your desk. Because one of the insidious things about urban renewal and the records that Dave works so diligently to find, and all of us do, is that the language is deliberately obscure. They measured Newburgh in the final report in cubic feet removed. There is a report that says we removed, 275,000 cubic feet of churches. We removed 5,700 cubic feet of retail. The measurement standards could not have all been local. There were ways that the tally was created that are so indiscernible, deliberately indiscernible, that in order to tell Newburgh, you lost 1,320 buildings, tax-paying parcels. I had to read through the census for weeks. I had to go to the old city directories and start to hop my finger along every page to see how many dwelling units there were at each address. I had to go to Sanborn maps, which are marvelous, I'm sure you've used. If not, just contact any of us for these links and look at the footprints and say, oh, there was another building out back and somebody lived there too. You have to do the forensics to uncover this story because the records, if they were kept, are kept in deliberately obscure ways. It was shameful and everybody knew it from the beginning.
So we probably have time for one more question unless you have a yes or no question.
I'm curious about the protests and organizing against urban renewal. What kind of impacts did that have? Are there records from those community organizations? Yeah, that's what I'm curious about.
The Historical Society has some panels on display. Can you hear me okay? In the back about the protests, particularly from Reverend Moneymaker at St. Andrew's Church, who I don't know if you would say spearheaded, but was very instrumental in helping understand what the community's needs were. And if you look at the maps, you will see that St. Andrew's Church was saved from the wrecking ball because of his efforts. And when it still exists today. He also started the Martin Luther King Jr. Cultural Center that helped the Black community. But information about that is on the panels, and we do have a lot of information about protesters based on newspaper reporting, but you do have to talk to the people on the street and find out what that was all about, because we had one newspaper at the time, so it's always one-sided reporting. But using the newspaper information and then interviewing the local residents helped us to tell our story.
I also interpret it as clinical depression. My city's been clinically depressed since urban renewal. And when you are in that mindset, you say, I don't want to look back. The past was not good. The good old days were nothing but. And you don't keep the records. You may tell the stories at the kitchen table, but you don't keep the records. So as I have explored organizations that existed that I find in the city directories, does Nimrod Lodge of the Masons have some records? Nobody says they've got their records anymore. I think they just threw them out, gave them up, swept them away because of that true municipal clinical depression.
If you remember the promotional material that I showed in my presentation, basically what we're finding is at the beginning of an urban renewal project, when it was in the planning stage and people saw the brochures and the models, and urban renewal agencies did engage, they hired PR firms. So they sold these projects to the public. So during the planning phase, when these documents, when these brochures, contrasted the clothes on the clotheslines or a dilapidated backyard with this brand new city that would replace it, people would look and they're mildly supportive, right? Support was broad but not deep. People would be like, well, this looks fine, sure. But when the bulldozers started up and some of the photographs that Mary showed of, demolition and the Robinsons Bar and Grill, imagine being on that block trying to live and operate your business. That's when opposition started. So at the beginning, these planning brochures and models and these PR campaigns, mildly supportive, again, broad but not deep. When the projects went into execution, that's when the opposition started, because people then realized in a real concrete way what these projects meant in terms of their blocks, their communities, and so forth.
Okay, I think, we are at time. So Gina, are you coming back to close us out? Or?
Do you want to say
No, I don't think I have anything better than everyone else could say. I guess then thank you.
So, sitting in the audience with all of you, listening to the experiences, your expertise, your knowledge, it feels weighty. And I hope that people use this opportunity over lunch to talk to each other about what you learned, what you walked away from this presentation with. What does that mean for us now that we've pulled the thread? Where do we go from here? So hopefully I leave you with that message, that as we sit and eat over food, we say, where do we go now? So this is the formal conclusion of today's Southeastern meeting. There is now lunch being served in the hallway. It is a buffet lunch, so we welcome you to go out to gather your food and come back in here to socialize. Lunch will wrap up at 1 o'clock. During that time, please speak with our presenters. Come see the materials that Mayor McTamaney has brought and that Diane Lapis has brought in the back. And we are happy to speak with all of you. Thank you again for spending your morning and your early afternoon with us. Thank you.